Nablus is a Palestinian city in the West Bank that sits in the valley in the central hill between Mount Garzim and Mount Ebal. It was an ancient tell in the Bronze Age, then transformed to the Roman city of Flavia Neapolis, meaning New City. It was the city of Christian and Samaritan tensions in the Byzantine period and then gained the Arabic name Nablus in the 7th century when Muslims conquered the city. It was once a booming city of Samaritans, Christians, and Muslims, and today it is part of the Israeli occupation of the West Bank that the Palestinian National Authority governs, and the territory is predominantly Muslim with smaller Christian and Samaritan minorities. Nablus is a central location a little over 30 miles north of Jerusalem, about 42 miles east of Haifa, and is one of the first cities just over the border between Israel and the West Bank. It has wealthy economic ties from its soap manufacturing, olive oil exports, and hosts the head of the Palestinian Stock Exchange. It is the second largest secular city in the Palestinian Authority, with Ramallah in the first. The city has a population of about 200,000 people, including those living in the refugee camp of Balata. Balata sits in the eastern portion of the city of Nablus and is home to over 30,000 refugees who fled from Israel after the war in 1848. Many of the refugees ended up in Nablus because of its proximity to the Israeli West Bank border. Balata was established in 1950 by the UN and is the largest refugee camp in the West Bank. Originally intended to serve around 5,000 Palestinian refugees and now home to over 30,000 refugees, 60% of them being children. In the camp, there are approximately 8,900 kids that go to UN-established schools. To educate them, the UN has established 4 schools, 2 girls' and 2 boys' schools. Based on the 2021-22 school year report from the UN, the schools served 2,601 students with limited staff of only 85, total teachers, school principals, etc. Despite poor infrastructure and overpopulation, the UN makes updates on their students to rejoice in the small victories. From one of the schools in Balata, Noor Eddin Nasrallah was a math genius who can add and subtract large numbers in a matter of seconds. Despite his family's inability to provide the funds for him to go to special training and perform in these international competitions, his school and colleagues gathered enough money to send him. Abdullah Karoub, a project manager for the UN at the camp, was born and raised in Balata until he made it out of the camp to get a higher education in Russia, where he eventually earned a master's degree in international law before returning back to the camp to serve his people. His main focus is children. He says, "The violence in the camp is a normal result of Balata. This is the result of any kind of marginalized areas where people are living in bad conditions and it's crowded." He says, without helping the children, then the world cannot have any expectation of these children other than to turn to some kind of violence or crime. In order to improve the difficult situation in Balata, Karoub says that it is important to show children that there is life outside of Balata and they can escape. He promotes this goal through his work with the Yafa Cultural Center in Balata, which is an escape for children and teens from everyday hardship they face. Along with education, the UN also handles the healthcare in Balata. The UN Health Center serves almost 50,000 refugees from both inside and outside of the camp. It was reconstructed in 2017 with funding from the Saudi Fund for Development. Throughout the entire camp, there is one healthcare center with a total of 34 health staff that are responsible for meeting the needs of 2,699 patients with non-communicable diseases, 1,002 pregnant women, and 3,509 children ages 0 to 5. These are only the number of patients they're able to provide with care in the camp, not everyone in the camp who needs care. They are fighting in a losing battle with lack of supplies, staff, support, and infrastructure. The UN also implements a social safety net program that provides cash assistance to 2,448 people in desperate need this year. The sanitation program with the camp are also implemented by the UN. The UN sanitation foreman manages a team of 22 sanitation laborers where they provide sewage connections in Balata and get rid of waste. As Americans living in a wealthy country, we are often met with opportunities to move and travel according to our own wants and needs. And with Balata being a permanent camp and close to other cities where people may find better opportunities, you may find the question in your mind, why wouldn't these people leave? While the obvious answer is poverty because the camp is ridden with it, there are people who work and make money. However, in the example of Ahmad Kader, we see the importance of origin and land in this region.
إنه إشي يعني دائم مش
أكيد يعني هلا
permanent.
بإمكاننا إنه نروح نعيش برا المخيم، بس إنه ما دامنا تخلينا عن المخيم هيك إحنا تخلينا عن مبادئنا إنه حق العودة. إحنا بنطمع دائما إنه مش نطلع من المخيم نروح على مكان ثاني، إحنا بنطمع إنه نرجع على طول على يافا على أرضنا على مكان سيدي اللي انولد فيه، لأنه انتمائنا بالنهاية بيجي لمدننا الأصلية، بيجي ليافا وحيفا وعكا وأراضي 48، مش لا إنه إنه إحنا الفلسطينيين كلنا واحد صح، بس أنا ليش أطلع أعيش من مخيم بلاط أروح أستقر بمكان ثاني، وأنا إذا استقريت في المكان الثاني خلص رح أصير من هذا المكان، رح أتخلى عن حقي في العودة. إحنا ما بدنا نتخلى عن حقنا في العودة. أكيد يعني هذا حلمنا، إحنا تربينا على هذا الإشي إنه حق العودة لا بديل عنه، إنه أنا من يافا لازم أرجع عن يافا، إذا أنا ما رجعتش يمكن ابني يرجع، يمكن حفيدي، بس المهم في حدا من سلالتنا رح يرجع. هاي هي كل الفكرة.
The importance of the right to return to the people in Balata stems from the Arab belief of Tusmud. Tusmud is the belief that the land is attached to the families or tribes that live on it. They believe in a deep connection that's meaningful with their land. The tribes that developed this thinking were very prevalent in Palestine during the reign of the Ottoman Empire. They were referred to as Hasmulas. They were strong tribes that covered regions of the land, and the people in these tribes associated their identity with these tribes and the land that they settled on. These tribes were often very involved in agriculture, and the land was often their livelihood and business as farmers. This meant they knew everything about the land in and out, thus further deepening their connection to it. Balata is plagued with violence, from the Israeli army's raids and destruction to the crossfire of the terrorist groups that develop within the camp to resist against the army.
We're inside one of the homes in the Balata refugee camp in Nablus that was raided over the course of a 15-hour operation by Israeli soldiers. This is the fourth major operation to happen in this community in a week. This is one of 4 homes that the Israelis apparently want demolished. They were looking for someone. They broke in through the door over here, and we'll just give you a sense of how much devastation happens when one of these raids takes place in this community. They've basically overturned every single cupboard and shelf, every closet in this home. Every room you look in, every single room is completely overturned. And if you see there, damage to a photograph of the Kaaba in Mecca. So that doesn't seem necessarily like it represented any sort of security threat, but apparently Israeli forces are looking for weapons. They're looking for anything suspicious. They confiscate identification cards, cell phones, and basically turn entire homes completely inside out. They damaged electronics. There's refrigerators here that are no longer functioning. The kitchen is completely unusable. Every appliance in this home was damaged. What electronic appliances represent in terms of a threat to the Israeli forces seems unclear. People living here say it is meant to create a long-term financial burden, continue to perpetuate this sense of fear and intimidation and frustration that these communities feel. This home, like several we've seen in the past few weeks, we've seen several just today, all with the same MO. 15 hours of this kind of ongoing intimidation through these raids just in the Balata refugee camp. Again, this is the 4th time to happen in the course of a week, and what people here are telling us is they are very worried that as the ceasefire in Gaza moves forward, that as the guns go silent in Gaza, then pressure by the Israeli forces on communities like this in the occupied West Bank will only continue to go up. Zain Basravi, Al Jazeera, in the Balata refugee camp in Nablus.
Various terrorist groups often view themselves as a policing body within the camp between the inhabitants of Balata as well as resistance against the Israeli troops. The people within the camp often idolize the terrorist groups and view them as the only representation they have. In a Washington Post interview and story about terrorist leader Zufi, they described 2 families within the camp argument escalating into an armed fight, and Zufi and his younger companions settle it. Zufi says, "I am forced to be the policeman, the father, the guard." Zufi is the commander of the Balata branch of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades. Zufi started this sect of the tourist organization as Israeli raids and violence around the West Bank increased. These men and other Palestinians around the West Bank claim that the Palestinian Authority has taken sides with Israel and claims that the PA has allowed more Israeli control and even given them information about the people within the camp. Interestingly enough, Israel claims the exact opposite and claims that they have to raid the camps in order to break up the terrorist groups, and that the Palestinian Authority isn't involved enough in keeping order in the West Bank. They accuse the PA of allowing militant terrorist organizations to operate freely and smuggle and distribute illegal and homemade weapons throughout the camp. According to the Washington Post, the resulting vacuum has turned the camps into outposts of armed anarchy. Militant groups often are the only authority. Around the camps, there are pictures of fighters who have died, often by the hands of the Israeli army, and the young men in the camp often look up to these fighters and aspire to be like them when they're older. There are even necklaces made with faces of these deceased militants, as well as posters all around the camp. As I was researching, I stumbled across this picture of young boys in Balata, and as I saved it, I noticed his shirt. The young man on the left has a Michigan shirt on. He probably isn't sure where the state of Michigan is on a map and probably isn't a Michigan football fan, and by his age and the education resources in Balata, it is likely that he can't read the English letters presented to him on this shirt, because to him it is just a shirt. But to me, it is a reminder of my privilege and gratitude that I have to live in a place like this and pay for an excellent education and resources that this little boy living in a refugee camp couldn't dream of. These living conditions aren't fair and need to be repaired for the little boys and girls who know no different.